Some stories don't begin with a hero, they begin with a failure. And on a blistering afternoon at a Marine sniper range, failure echoed louder than gunshots. 5 young Marines, tired, frustrated, sweating through their uniforms, couldn't land a single clean shot on a target staring back at them from just 700 yards away. Every miss felt heavier than the desert heat, eating away at their confidence. They were supposed to be the best. They were training to protect their brothers in battle. But today, well, they felt like complete disappointments. What they didn't know was that help was coming from someone no one expected. A man older than their grandfathers. A man who walked slowly but carried decades of war in his eyes. A man the corps had nearly forgotten, but who would soon remind these Marines what true precision, discipline, and heart really meant. And before this day was over, he would change all their lives forever. The sun rose like a white flame over the training range, the sand shimmering almost silver from the heat. The targets, thin metal silhouettes, stood silently in the distance, daring the Marines to prove they deserved their rifles. Private Dalton fired first. His breath shook. His hands shook. His bullet shook the dirt 10 feet away from the mark. He cursed under his breath. Again, the instructor ordered. Dalton fired again. Another miss. Next came Torres, the calmest in the group. He adjusted his scope with precision, every movement deliberate. But when he pulled the trigger, the bullet flew wide. He blinked hard, stunned. "That's impossible," he murmured. But impossibilities were becoming common today. A growing dread settled inside the squad. Sniper training wasn't just another skill. It was the difference between life and death in the field. You didn't get close. You didn't get close. You got the target, or you failed your brothers. And today, they were failing. The supervising officer, Lieutenant Gregg, paced behind them with tightening jaw muscles. The young men weren't lazy. They weren't untrained. They just couldn't connect. Something was missing. Discipline, technique, grounding, maybe even confidence itself. The more they missed, the harder they tried. The harder they tried, the more they missed. A vicious cycle. By noon, frustration had become despair. Dalton slammed his rifle into the dust, breathing hard. "Sir, I don't get it. We're doing everything right." Gregg stared at him with exhausted honesty. "Maybe everything except the thing that matters." Then they heard footsteps approaching. Slow, steady, almost stubborn. The kind of footsteps made by someone who had marched through more pain than the rest of them combined. The Marines turned and saw a white, bearded older man, probably pushing 75, wearing a faded cap and red shirt. Not a uniform. His eyes were sharp but tired, holding the weight of memories they couldn't imagine. "Damn weapons aren't the problem," he muttered, looking at the rifles like they were old friends. "The problem is you boys forgot what you're fighting with." The Marines looked at each other, confused. Lieutenant Gregg stiffened. "Sir, this is a restricted training." "I know what it is." The old man interrupted calmly. "I used to run it." Silence fell like a thick blanket. This was him. The legend whispered in the barracks. The marksman whose stories sounded too insane to be true. The veteran who had retired decades ago, and hadn't been back since. But why was he here today? The old veteran stepped beside Dalton, nodding at his rifle. "May I?" Dalton hesitated, then handed the weapon over with both hands, as if passing a relic to its rightful owner. The veteran didn't kneel. He didn't check the wind. He didn't measure distance. He simply breathed once, deep and slow, like the earth had paused for him, and fired. Dinge, the bullet hit dead center. The Marines froze. The old man sighed, almost annoyed. "It's not the rifle. It's not the wind. It's you." He handed the weapon back to Dalton. Chapter 1 of Sniping, Learn to Get Out of Your Own Way. The Marines listened like students receiving answers to questions they didn't even know how to ask. And for the first time that day hope returned. The veteran sat them down in a half-circle, rifles resting across their knees. The heat still pressed on them, but for the first time, they weren't thinking about the temperature. They were thinking about him. He introduced himself only as Harrison, no rank. No titles. Just a name packed with a quiet history. "You boys think sniping is about the shot," Harrison began. "But it's not. It's about the shooter. Your heartbeat, your breath, your doubts. Every one of them drags the bullet off its path." He knelt, pushing a handful of sand aside to draw a simple line in the dust. "This," he said, "is the truth. A bullet doesn't care about fear. It doesn't care about frustration. It follows the laws of physics. But you follow the laws of whatever's going on in your head. Torres swallowed. So what are we doing wrong? Everything, Harrison said bluntly. And nothing. He pointed to Dalton. You rush because you think slow means weak. To Morales. You hold your breath too tight. You're strangling the shot. To Kennedy. You get angry when you miss, so your next shot is doomed before it starts. He wasn't criticizing. He was diagnosing. Then Harrison lay down in the dirt, motioning for them to copy him. Listen, he commanded. They listened. Not to him, but to the wind, to their heartbeats, to the stillness between breaths. Your enemy isn't the target, Harrison whispered. Your enemy is everything that distracts you from your purpose. Slowly, he guided them through breathing patterns, through grounding their elbows, through letting the rifle become an extension of themselves instead of a tool they were forcing. He moved from Marine to Marine, adjusting a hand here, lowering a shoulder there, small corrections that felt insignificant but changed everything. Again, he said. One by one, the Marines took their shots. D.I.N.G. Torres hit center mass. D.I. Morales clipped the bullseye. D.I.N.G. A chorus of success. Dalton was the last. His hands still trembled, but Harrison placed a firm hand on his back. This time, he said, trust the bullet. Dalton exhaled, pulled the trigger dead center. He laughed, a raw, relieved sound he never thought he'd make on this range. The squad erupted in cheers, slapping his shoulders, shouting triumphantly at the sky. But Harrison only smiled softly, watching them like a father who'd seen his sons grow a little more in a single hour than in months. When Lieutenant Gregg approached, he looked almost speechless. Sir, how did you know they'd listen? That they'd get it? Harrison looked out at the targets glinting in the sun. Because no Marine wants to fail, he said quietly. Sometimes they just need someone who remembers what failing feels like. As the sun began to set, the Marines packed up, but none of them walked away the same. They had learned more than marksmanship. They had learned discipline, humility, patience, and the value of wisdom passed down through generations. And as Harrison walked off into the fading light, Dalton called out, "Will we see you again, sir?" Harrison lifted a hand without turning. "If you keep missing, probably." The Marines laughed, but behind that humor was something heavier. Gratitude. Respect. A memory they would carry into every mission, every challenge, every shot. Because sometimes legends don't just tell stories. Sometimes legends teach them.